Welcome to Twin Signals, Metrics at Work, with Elizabeth P. Morgan. Because metrics only matter when everyone agrees on what they mean.
In this episode of Metrics at Work, I'm joined by Matt Twist, Head of Sales EMEA at Earnix. Matt argues that great sales organizations are built on micro KPIs that measure every stage of the sales pipeline, allowing leaders to identify exactly where momentum is gained or lost. Sales leaders, CROs, and revenue teams will learn how breaking the pipeline into measurable stages creates more predictable forecasting, and why the human interactions that move opportunities through the pipeline deserve just as much attention as the numbers themselves. Hey everybody, and welcome to Metrics at Work. I am delighted to be here today with Matt Twist, Head of Sales EMEA at Earnix. Hey Matt, how are you?
I'm well, Liz. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you too. Feeling human?
Feeling humid and human, yes. All in the same package.
I say so, Matt, because I'm thinking, over the last 10 years, there was this whole kind of push to say that relationship selling, empathy selling, the humanity in selling was really passé. And I was always so aware of you, first and foremost as a human, but also as an intensely motivating human and someone that brought the customer, the buying center, the BDRs, the team, the success people, everyone unified to really make an insightful and exciting and fun experience for people when they're locking down or learning and closing big fat enterprise deals. So very glad to be talking to a humanist sales leader at a time when the world is starting to recognize that with all this AI around, we need emotions and friendship and insight, human insight in our sales processes. So hello again.
Good. Thank you, Liz.
Hey, Matt, can you tell us all a little bit about the types of companies and sales teams you've been leading over the last years?
So I've been leading humans, Liz, probably for about the last 25 years. And most of the career, how we met is in high growth, B2B enterprise sales, complex products, long sales cycles, multiple stakeholders. And really what I've been doing is building sales teams. I started off as an individual contributor, of course, and then building sales teams either globally or in Europe. And throughout that time, it's funny you mention obviously the shift in dynamic, and we're going back into more human-centric selling. But one thing that stays throughout that, my career and when we've worked together is the metrics that underpin those things. And it's been a career based on large enterprise deals, but also always using the data that we have available to ensure that we can be as predictable as possible.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me about Earnix? And what you're doing there?
Yeah, so Earnix, we're the market leader in rating, pricing, underwriting, and personalization in insurance. So we work with large global insurance carriers, and ultimately, insurance is still an industry that is modernizing, going through digitization, and there's a large need for AI technology, agentic AI, and algorithmic rating and pricing to enable the carriers that we work with to make smarter, faster, quicker decisions, ultimately that benefit the end customer. So my current role is leading the European sales team and Africa as well, EMEA, and enabling them to grow and putting processes in place, hopefully to become a predictable revenue engine.
Yeah, and how big is Earnix?
So we're about 400 people, headquartered in Boston in the US. And obviously we have a big presence in Europe, and the London market insurance obviously is huge. But across Europe, we're probably about 60, 70 people.
Business is booming?
Yes, it's very good. The evolution of AI, insurance is inherently a risk averse business or vertical and industry. That's the whole premise of insurance. But now through the adoption of AI, we're seeing a massive uplift in adoption of the technology because it's here to stay now. It's not a blockchain that came and kind of went. It's proving its value, and the carriers are working with, are adopting it at speed and at pace.
Exciting. So you say you're working with metrics too. You have always worked with metrics to build predictability. What are the metrics you depend on most?
Predictability in sales is one of the silver bullet, hey Liz. So I of course there's multiple KPIs and the data is growing, so KPIs are growing. But I don't really use a KPI or a couple of KPIs. What I like to look at is multiple KPIs. I refer to these as micro KPIs, and it's actually quite a simple concept. But if you can make this work and get under the hood, it actually does give you an insight into the predictability of the future proof of your pipeline and your revenue engine of the business. And ultimately what it's doing is using the formula from the sales funnel, which is the MQL to SQL, discovery meetings, demo meetings, then to proposal, and ultimately and hopefully to close. And what I do is take the conversion ratios from each of those stages, and then we break those down into micro KPIs. So if I unpack that a little bit more, let's assume our target is $1 million for the year, and our average deal value is $100,000. That means we need 10 deals a year. So what we need to do is work out the amount of activity, the amount of stuff or MQLs and SQLs throughout that funnel to hit that 10 deals. So we imagine for every proposal we send, let's say we send 4 proposals, we know we will get 1 deal. So we know over the course of the year, we need to send 40 proposals.
Mm-hmm.
And then we back engineer that whole way to the MQL. So how many MQLs do we need to ultimately close 1 deal? And then on a weekly basis, we look at these numbers. So how many MQLs have we got, SQLs, and does that ladder up to allow us to hit that number? So, and if our average sales cycle is 12 to 18 months, which it generally is in insurance definitively or large enterprise, we can get a good idea 12 months ahead if we're not hitting those discovery meetings in the month that we need to get in 12 months to get the deals, where we're going. So that's what we focus on a lot. We do that weekly, then monthly, and we keep a very close eye on that. And ultimately it does give you that foresight into what the revenue is going to look like in 12 months time. I think when you just use revenue or the target as a number, it's quite abstract. And it's sometimes hard for, especially if it's a large number, for salespeople to go, right, well, how do we get there? But if you can break that down into smaller chunks, then it allows the business to understand what we're doing and then to analyze that on a weekly or monthly basis to make those changes early to allow you to get to where you want to go.
So when we think about this funnel and these micro KPIs, I guess the real source in all of this is getting the conversion rates right.
That's correct. Yeah.
So how do you play that? How do you introduce them and monitor them and manipulate them?
Manipulate them, exactly. Well, that's actually the key fundamental, Liz. So I'm glad you asked the question. So if you're an established business, you obviously found product market fit, you have X amount of revenue already, the likelihood is we'll have them in the business somewhere, but it's not easy to always find them, right? Then this is, once you can get there, you will have a mature sales function and cycle. But if you are, seed, Series A, the likelihood is you will not have these metrics, or they'll be very rough. So then what you can use is industry benchmarks, and that's quite easy to find if you're in InsurTech or if you're in MarTech, whatever the industry is, there are some rough benchmarks that you can aspire to hit. But as you close more deals, of course, because you need to close the deals to understand the conversion metrics, then it's about getting into that data. And that, again, is tricky because enterprise sales is messy. It's not linear. It's unlinear. It's a mess. It's wibbly wobbly. It goes everywhere. So it does take a bit of time, and it is something that needs to be iterated on. You won't just get the conversion rate. Oh, we've got them, because they're open for interpretation, of course, as well. But ultimately it's driving down into all that data and the KPIs that you have originally from your marketing team, from the sales team, from your CRM. Most HubSpots and Salesforce have some rudimentary versions of this data included. And then it's working that through and then applying that to the existing data and then forward looking based on the revenue target on your average deal size.
And just a follow-up to that. So I guess there's just this constant iteration with your judgment, the judgment of the contributor, the benchmark number, and your belief that this conversion, this forecasted conversion is going to take effect, right?
Well, exactly. And the thing is, Liz, you have macro events that happen all the time that will impact these. So you could do the conversion in work in January, but the world changes, as we're seeing constantly at the moment, that this will affect it. So it is by no means bulletproof and 100% accurate, but what it does give you is a comfort and understanding that if you're very likely to get to where you want to go, assuming the points through now are accurate enough. But of course they do change, and that again you have to iterate with all things we do. And I think ultimately back to enterprise sales is a long, hard slog. So things will inevitably change throughout that process, but it does give you that foundation for understanding what we need to be doing on a weekly basis in order to get where we need to go in quite an abstract and long time.
So when you think about this funnel and your micro KPIs, which are the KPIs where you encounter the most misunderstandings? Where are the flashpoints?
Well, Liz, as a marketer, you probably know the answer to this one. It's obviously MQLs and the definition of MQLs, SQLs, and the inherent friction between sales and marketing. That wasn't a good lead. That was a great lead. So, but they're inherent or misinterpretations in any technology business. So, every company does have, not all slight, but there is slight nuances on interpretation of MQL, SQL, discovery meeting, etc. However, it is quite a, industry standard information and industry standard KPIs. So there shouldn't be too much misinterpretation because every company should have some kind of sales funnel, and it's just engineering the data underneath that to align people behind it.
So, okay, that's sort of high level engineering the data to align people behind it, right? But how are you overcoming those, or how are you establishing meaning around those moments in your teams? So.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, KPIs, I think, so we're going to introduce KPIs and people, it's like I'm being watched over. I've got to, make so many calls a day, emails, whatever that is. And inherently it's hard to get people aligned behind that because it's viewed more as a stick, that it's some kind of monitoring device or monitoring management technique on a dashboard. But the reverse of that is true, because if you have obviously salespeople will want to hit quota, business wants to hit quota, everyone wants to hit quota. So if it's explained and understood why we're doing this, is ultimately a tool for you as a salesperson to hit your number, right? We don't want to be left in September going, we're 50% under, right? So if it's portrayed in that way, that we're all using it to be more successful, which it ultimately is, it's not a wolf in sheep's clothing, then we can get by, and we do get by, because we know if we just hit those discovery meetings, 5 discovery meetings a week, whatever the number is, then I'm 90% more likely to hit my target than if I just hoped, we did 3 or 4 and we just hope we get there. So the reverse actually of buying of the KPI resistance is actually true in this case, because people get behind it and want to do it and want to deliver on those numbers.
So they see the KPIs as a tool to help them make sure they hit their quota.
Exactly. And it's a very easy way to, again, obviously when you have as the team to understand, and then also managing upward either to the execs or the board, really quick snapshot with the business. And there is interpretation in there, Liz, of course, because what is a good discovery meeting? And we can use things like MEDDIC for that, of course. But ultimately, it can be used as a diagnosis tool, because if we're falling off for SQLs, what is the qualification there? Why are we not hitting that number? And then why is the discovery meetings, why are we not converting, classic sales funnel, why are we not converting into demos, et cetera, but having that weekly, bi-weekly or monthly snapshot of the business it gives everyone the compass where we need to go.
I'm going to throw one in here. I mean, you did mention the conflict between MQLs, marketing and sales, right? What about sales and product, right? When we're talking about these meetings that aren't going so well, or these proposals that aren't converting as they should.
Well, Liz, I don't think I've ever had a demo that hasn't gone successfully. Yeah, exactly. So, but that's again, they're inevitably we're gonna, we're building bleeding edge technology, right? So it doesn't work perfectly every time, and that's a fact of life. Especially as we move into agentic AI now, it's completely new territory for many businesses. But again, having that understanding of where we need to improve is obviously the actual response to that, and be that in the demo, in the product, or be that in the marketing qualified lead, or in the salesperson's qualification. I wouldn't say that you could attribute that to someone, but it gives us a wider understanding of the business, how actually we're all interrelated, that we need the demo to go well, that we need marketing. And, ultimately we're all in this as a team together as a business. So we can quickly understand that. And then, if we can't improve the demo, then we're not going to get to the number in 1 month's time. So this is a real case. So it gives you the quantitative element of that discussion of how we need to improve the business to drive forward.
You've mentioned MEDDIC a few times. Could you explain MEDDIC for the people that are joining us that aren't sales professionals?
Of course. So there's numerous sales methodologies, probably 10, the big ones, 10 or 20 in the world, which many sales leaders use. However, MEDDIC is a very compact, easy way to understand a deal. So MEDDIC is made up of 6 letters. I forgot. Metrics, economic buyer, decision maker, decision process, identify pain, and champion. And there's versions of this as MEDDIC, and it's grown. But I'm a bit older, so I still use the original. And what you have in MEDDIC is 6 areas that we need to, you and I, Liz, as if we were salespeople, we'd sit and talk about a deal and go, is there metrics? Is there a needle that needs to be moved in that business? Either they want to make more revenue, be more efficient, whatever that metric may be. Do we know the economic buyer, which is E, and that's the person who's going to sign our check. And this goes on with decision process and identify pain, and champion is someone internally in the enterprise who believes in our software to buy it. And ultimately what you do with MEDDIC is a checklist. And we talk about that in our sales one-to-ones with our team. And if there's a deal we say is going to close, and let's say there's 2 parts of the acronym that haven't been completed, the likelihood is that deal won't close if we don't know the economic buyer. If there isn't a metric we can move, because then we can't build a business case. So how do we get the sign off of the budget? So whilst I use the micro KPIs as a signal tool, as an early warning and understanding where we are looking today and moving forward, how we get deeper into the deals to understand how we can improve the deal and qualify that deal properly is MEDDIC. And 20 years ago there were far more, I suppose, sales methodologies or frameworks, but more and more it's becoming MEDDIC. So most software companies are using a version of MEDDIC today because it's really simple to understand for the salesperson, for the sales leader, and then also for either the board or the C-level management. And again, with MEDDIC, Liz, if once the salesperson understands that and buys into it, if you use it properly, it's just going to make you more money. It's not a tool to find, it'll find opportunities where you can improve the deal. Let's put it that way. So,
okay. So you're championing MEDDIC as you build and lead these teams as a language that helps the business to understand how predictable those numbers are, or the predictability of the numbers you're presenting and reporting. Yeah. So that's the qualitative behind the...
Exactly. Yeah, the qualitative behind the quantitative, exactly that.
And also the talking point in your one-on-one discussions with your team.
Exactly. I think if this becomes our language and we all buy into this language of when we have one-to-ones, that we just go through these qualification metrics, it's not a painful operation. And of course, there's times when we may not know the exact metrics, and that's what we need to find out for that week. That's our job that week, is to go and get the metrics. And if we get those metrics, we're more likely to close the deal. So it's, again, it could be viewed as a coercion from or management, through kind of pressure. But it's not that. It's ultimately, if we can understand this and work on this together, we'll win.
It's my pleasure to tell you that Twin Signals Metrics at Work is sponsored by HelloTwin.ai, the world's first digital authority. Stop managing agents. Start managing outcomes. Sign up for the private beta program today at HelloTwin.ai.
Enterprise sales is messy, it's unstructured, it's not linear. And what we need, and I suppose this is the point of the micro KPIs and using MEDDIC together, it gives you structure. And we've all thought we're going to win deals, and at the last minute we've lost those deals. There isn't a salesperson on earth, I'll be very surprised, who hasn't experienced that. And our job as sales leaders and salespeople is to lessen that chance happening again. And how we do that is via structure, through taking something unstructured and trying to give it structure so we can understand it and then predict it.
Nice. If everyone across the company could better understand one metric, what would it be?
One metric. It's going to be a little bit of a cheat answer here, Liz, because I'm going to say the conversion metric of the funnel. And there's many metrics in there. But I think and I think it alludes back to your point earlier about product and marketing. We can understand as a business where we need to get better and improve. So those conversion metrics in the funnel, it's so insightful of how we're doing. Our marketing amazing, and our sales team just can't you qualify properly in those discovery meetings, and we get an insight of how we're kind of performing as a group. So understanding those conversion metrics. And ultimately, that's as we can, we're all here for one thing only, and that's to close more deals. Be you in product or be you in marketing, we're all ultimately doing the same thing. So I think, understanding that process and then the conversion within that.
Yeah, and I guess it's not so much. Is it a question of understanding the conversion, or is it a question of paying attention to it and seeing that there are these flashpoints where things are going wrong?
Yes, I suppose, it's not so much understanding. I'd agree with you. It's I think it is, Liz. It's because it's understanding what that means. So obviously it's easy to understand the 26% conversion rate. That's not hard to understand. But the implication of that conversion rate and that metric and what it means for us as a business. And it could mean that we're not going to hit our target next year. And that's a big point that we need to address 12 months ahead of time, as opposed to 2 months ahead of time or 2 quarters ahead of time.
Matt, I have a pretty wild question, but a friend of mine asked me to start asking it in this podcast. And that is, what in your, people do try to game the system. When someone is using metrics or they're reporting against metrics, the temptation to manipulate the numbers or present something in a different way is always there. In your opinion, which sales metric or micro KPI is the easiest to game?
Yeah, it's a great question, Liz. Not that I've ever done that. But I think it's earlier up the funnel. It is MQL and SQL. And I see it happening repeatedly. And I think back to your early question about understanding what an MQL is, it's not just, saying, I've had instances before, people saying, we didn't want the dinner invite, but please get in contact again. And so that's an MQL. It's not really an MQL. So it is that understanding, and then, and again, those are, and I understand people may do that, and it may be through not complete understanding how we're defining these things. But yeah, I think MQL, SQL is the easiest to game. But once, and you have to get under the lid of these things and go through and understand exactly what's in, because if it's bad up here, it's going to be bad over there as well. We know that, right? So it's really getting under that skin. And again, it goes back to, I think KPIs in itself has a negative connotation, but once it's understood that we need the right definition, the right MQL to ensure we get the right SQLs and what that means for you as an individual, then we get buy-in again. It's just taking that time for the understanding with the team.
Yeah. So, and I guess if you're getting your marketing colleagues to look at this funnel, this progression of micro KPIs, they're going to pretty much see that no matter how many MQLs they're throwing over the fence, they're not going to be getting conversions to discovery meetings and demo meetings and proposals and so on. So gaming is a very one micro KPI game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the age-old conversation of marketing on giving me leads, and they're giving me 20 leads. Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure you've had that conversation, Liz.
Well, I guess the reason why I'm talking with you, Matt, is because I think the only way to get over that is to jointly commit and to really define an ICP and be committed to a MEDDIC or a micro KPI progression, and to also bonus and incentivize marketers on a later stage results. So not just a number of MQLs, but a number of MQLs that convert at a desired rate to serious business.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think, we talked earlier about the plethora of data and KPIs that are available out there. We could have KPIs in literally anything, on IP addresses, on individuals, however that works. And it goes back to the human-centric approach, but it's down to quality, right? We can have 100 MQLs if we want this month. We could find a way of making that statistic if we wanted to do it. 200, whatever the number you need. But if there isn't there substance behind those, then we're all wasting our time. And it is that conversation, and it's a joint effort. And I completely agree with you with the remuneration for the marketing team. Super important. Super important.
We've talked a little bit about the challenges that marketeers can present to a revenue leader like yourself in this funnel. And we've also flagged a couple of problems with product, maybe when the demos don't go so nicely. What about problems within the sales team? And the one that's coming to mind for me are happy ears, salespeople that are convinced they're going to close something when maybe the evidence isn't there. What's your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, we are all guilty of having happy ears. I think it's because we get told no so often. As soon as we get a yes, we latch onto it and go. But that is a massive problem. And again, the qualification and MEDDIC is a great way of, finding the reality of the situation. And there's nothing more exciting than an enthused salesperson coming out of a meeting going, that was the greatest meeting ever. It's just one of the nicest things to hear. So I think we have to encourage that, but also we have to temper that with the realism of we're not going to sit here and waste maybe 6 months on this if it's not the real deal. So MEDDIC's very good for that because it goes back to the structure because salespeople, I think by nature, or there's definitively a trait in salespeople that maybe they're unstructured, they're gregarious, they want to be energetic and be excited about deals. And then when you tie in with that, with the, unstructured way enterprise sales works, you could end up in problems with happy ears. So MEDDIC's very good for bringing that structure back and having that more of a calm, rational conversation. But really, again, it's like, well, we didn't find that out in this call. We need to find it out. So let's go away and do it. And it's not a Damocles sword hanging over your head that if you don't do it, it's going to benefit everyone. So I would always encourage and still love those moments of the salesperson or me coming out of a sales meeting, being excited. But that temper and the realism and the structure the MEDDIC gives is a massive help.
Matt, what has been your experience so far with AI and metrics in sales?
Yeah, so I have built and we are using multiple AI tools. We're an AI company, so it'd be remiss of us if we're not using AI. So that goes through demand gen and how we analyze and, monitor calls or, go through notes from meetings, and also obviously with outreach and how we're connecting with prospects. The real use, I think, for AI is obviously those tools are super important, but in KPIs, I made a point earlier, obviously now we can have KPIs on everything, and obviously we have data and data, which is great, but it's understanding the data is the trick, right? So I think for me, the real use of AI is the correlation of that data. And of course, that's what you guys are doing at Hello Twin now. But taking all the intent data, taking all the customer data, and then, product data, as well as you referred to earlier, Liz, demo data, whatever the data is actually, and then using models to enhance that, to understand deeper into what we're actually doing and how we can improve, based on those KPIs is what I'm looking forward to using AI predominantly for, which we're not actually yet.
A lot of the people I speak to discount activity, but your micro KPI progression is to a large extent looking at those fundamental activities, right? So what are you thinking about activity metrics and measures?
The question is, I think, first of all, I think people discount activity because you can confuse, or you can have dumb activity, right? So it's like, well, you've done 10 calls, right? Who cares, right? Or 10 meetings, but it's actually how you grow the business. Activity is how we grow the business. I think, no one's ever said, let's do less discovery calls. We always want to do more. We always want to do more proposals. But of course, the quality of that proposal has to be to the right, again, to the ICP, the right person, to the right customer profile. So everything, actually, the micro KPIs I talked about is based on activity. And, I've never joined a company where, again, as I said, we need to do less activity, but it's always the opposite. We always have to do more. But then that goes again into all the other qualitative aspects that you refer to as in MEDDIC, the ICP. Those all have to be on point. And if those things are on point, and the MQLs and the SQLs are on point, if we can do 30% more activity, it means we're going to make percentage-wise more money this year. It's a simple equation. So, I have heard that, as that activity has been, talked down, but quality activity, we can never do enough of it.
Yeah. And looking ahead, which metrics do you think are going to matter most, and why?
Looking at, it's kind of everything we talked about, Liz. I think, I'm going to the previous question. I still believe in activity. I really do. I think we have a potential for some salespeople may think, well, we've got a lot of AI that can do the job, but we still need to be responding to customers within as soon as you get the email, because our competitors will. We still need to be getting the proposal out in that time frame. So it is activity, is urgency. So, and you couple that in with the quality and the buyer behavior information. And again, is one picture. It's not just a single thing. All these things come together to make a solid performing sales funnel and business ultimately. But for me, again, I'll maybe go against the grain and sound a bit old school, but it's the activity that boils down to, assuming we've got all the other points right above the activity, then just keep going, keep pushing, and have that urgency, and ultimately you'll be successful.
And when you're talking about activity here, you're talking about human activity.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Human assisted activity.
All the other activity is infinite, right? So you're talking about, are you saying that the metrics that matter most are going to be the number of meaningful human interactions in the sales process?
I think, this is a really good point, Liz. It is, we don't split, online meetings with in-person meetings, but it's something that we have thought about, and I have thought about, because an in-person meeting would have more on the heat map than a Teams meeting, because we're together and you get to build a rapport. So I think it's a really valid point. But it is human activity, it is the phone calls, it is that connection. And it's all the way back to the first question is about, you mentioned about humans and how we're coming back around from, automated sales. Sales elements of sales, of course, should be automated. But the actual function of making a connection and building confidence and trust with the person can only be done with the human interaction. It can't be done with, I say that, I sound like, can I say, I don't want to say that. It can't be done with AI.
And so looking ahead, which metrics do you think will matter most? And why?
So, the conversation, I have been inventing metrics, Liz. I've used the classic sales funnel metrics, just used through a different lens. And I think those metrics are still the most important. And I think they will remain the most important. Things such as discovery meetings, demo meetings. But I do also think, that underneath those metrics I'm talking about and KPIs is the human element. And we go all the way back to when we started the conversation. And I think actually the value of those KPIs and therefore the likelihood of propensity of that deal is probably more likely to close than if maybe you just done it on Teams. So if you take the two opposite extremes, so you have a high touch human sales process and a no touch human sales process in enterprise sales, I don't have to ask you this, which you think is more likely to close, because the human will win every time in that example. Because again, enterprise sales is high touch, is complex, and is messy. And, a lot of salesperson's role it is to sell, but it's to guide buyers through a very complex process. And the buyer wants someone they can trust to do that, to enable them to make the right decision. And I think that element of trust with humans is only going to exponentially increase, actually, which is ironic, given the way we are in technology today in the world.
I think it's very necessary and hopeful, Matt. So on that note, I should say thank you for sharing the messy world of enterprise sales and the need for all of us to use frameworks to ground ourselves, micro KPIs, and above all, to stay human. So
stay human, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks for listening to Twin Signals, Metrics at Work. See you next episode.